Thank you so much for having me, Business Summit. Good morning, Business Summit 2022. It's such a pleasure and honor to be here. I'm excited that the theme of this year's conference is collaboration, because to achieve our collective destinies as a country and as a continent, we need to collaborate. So let's just get right into it. I'll just go ahead and share my slides as we talk about exports this morning. Okay. Okay. So, we all typically get excited when we mention exports. I think it's the foreign exchange that gets us excited. The USD, the pound sterling, the euro, and, all the foreign currencies make us smile. They make us dream of how our lives and maybe our businesses can go a notch higher if we could just earn in foreign exchange, especially now that inflation is at an all-time high. But I speak to people all the time and I try to tell them that export is not a Ponzi scheme. It's not a Sogundogoji, like my people would say, a get rich quick scheme. It's not an avenue to earn forex without giving value. It's not an opportunity to swindle an unsuspecting party. And it's not a short position like an impatient business. It's actually creating value and receiving the equivalent forex for that value that you have created. So an exporter is a person or a company that the government agency, in our own case in Nigeria, the Nigerian Export Promotion Council, has authorized to move goods and services out of the border of our country, Nigeria. Exports could be formal or informal. It could be oil exports or non-oil exports. For a long time, Nigeria has focused on oil exports. And well, I think all of us can see where that has brought us. Non-oil exports includes food, commodities, culture, language, music, movies, professional services, tourism, products, machinery, and so much more. In fact, more than you could ever imagine. A lot of us have tried to export, and for a long time, our focus has been on the challenges that hamper the ease of doing exports from Nigeria. For most people who have tried to export, you might have noticed that export is laden with bottlenecks and some challenges. My question all the time is always that if those bottlenecks all of a sudden just disappeared, would your company be ready to export? The first step of export readiness is understanding that you're an ambassador. And I always say this everywhere I go, that every time you decide to export or to be an exporter, you have chosen to be an ambassador. You represent Nigeria to the countries that you trade with. And you should always bear this in mind on every single transaction. The quality of your goods and services colors the perception of the international community about Nigeria as a people and as a trade partner. Immediately you move your goods out of this country, the goods cease to be your company's products. It then immediately becomes Nigeria. It becomes green, white, green. And so when they're talking about that product or they are talking about that commodity, you are most likely saying Nigeria. It's no longer your company that we are talking about. We're talking about Nigeria. So it's important that your products meet international standards. Let's look at some key export drivers. One of the export drivers that we're currently looking at is Brexit and the need for UK to secure new trade partners. If you are very current with everything that is happening, you know that Brexit happened a while ago and the UK is seeking for new trade partners. Another export driver, a major one, is the Russia-Ukraine war. A lot of people will note that our wheat comes from Russia and Ukraine, and the trade war has impacted the war, the real war has impacted majorly on the trading of wheat and other commodities that are supposed to come from this country. So typically what happens is that this has presented an opportunity for those who have those commodities to step into that space. I think a couple of weeks ago, India announced that they were no longer going to export their own wheat because they were anticipating a shortage. So this is the current export driver. Before all of this, there was the trade war between US and China. And if you have been listening to the news lately, you'll be hearing about the EU UK trade war is brewing. It has not started. It's as a result of the fallout between the Brexit rules. I think UK is trying to renege on some of the agreements in the Brexit rules, and so EU is between them. They are prepping for a trade war, and we're really hoping that it will not degenerate into that. But then the trade war is also driving exports. Another thing that is a key export driver is the massive exodus of Nigerians to developed economies. That's what we popularly call JAPA. JAPA is a key export driver because when Nigerians move, whenever a nationality moves, their culture moves, their food moves, their preferences move with them. So that's a key export driver. We will all remember COVID and how all of a sudden the world turned to natural alternatives and non-synthetic alternatives. There was a talk of ginger and a lot of steaming and all of that. And the price of ginger, I remember, went so high during COVID because of the perceived benefits of ginger to preserve the health of people. So the Global Health Campaign is another export driver. And then the last thing for us here that I'm looking at is the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. Of course, the African Continental Free Trade Agreement came into operation in January of 2021. And 1 year into it, there are a lot of opportunities to be explored in the countries in Africa as we begin to trade among ourselves. To better understand collaboration, which is the theme of this particular summit, I'd like us to take a look at our mobile phones. So I picked up my own mobile phone, and I just want you to take a look at your own mobile phone. Pick it up, and then let's just look at it. It's almost impossible to believe that 21 years ago, there were no mobile phones. I was trying to describe the mobile phone ecosystem to some undergraduates that I was speaking to a couple of weeks ago, and I was like, no, the demography doesn't cut it because the mobile phone ecosystem was 21 years ago. And then, just look at your phone for a bit and look at the phone design, the memory card slot, the SIM card, the screen guard, the operating system, if it's an Android or an iOS, the apps in it, the data you use, your headphones, your AirPods, the chargers, the power banks. It's very interesting that whole industries have been built around this one product, and it's the mobile phone. And that's just active collaboration at work. Whenever we mention global trade, collaboration is in the next room, just waiting to be invited into the conversation, because global trade thrives on collaboration. in the export ecosystem, can we say that there's active collaboration in Nigeria, especially where non-oil export is concerned? I don't think so. I think not yet. And this is because export is currently at the infancy level, because of the neglect, non-oil exports, that is, because of the neglect over the years. So it's undeveloped, it's underdeveloped, not as developed as we want it to be, is unstructured. Most exporters are having to build their own individual ecosystems, and that's putting a lot on their own working capital and effectiveness as businesses. The export ecosystem is a network of organizations involved in the delivery of export products or services through competition and cooperation. Of course, now we love to say competition, which is cooperation, and more like collaboration, right? Is the community needed for the export of goods and services to be efficiently and effectively consummated, right? I know that everybody, when we say exports, everybody is thinking about putting out their own products or service into the market, into the export market. Everybody wants to put out Ada's changing, BC's changing, another person wants to put out Hawa's changing. Everybody just wants to put out their own products. And I always say, what about playing along the export value chain and providing export support services? There are a lot of possibilities that collaboration provides in the ecosystem. And, as we go through some of those possibilities, I would like you to consider it and think about it for a bit. Don't shut down at this point. I would like you to open up your minds and then look at what possibilities that are in the ecosystem that you could possibly explore. I don't know if you remember this headline from last year, where they said that over 76% of Nigeria's agricultural commodities were rejected by the EU. NAFDAC had come out, and this was a very, very major discussion. I remember, I think I did 2 interviews on this. And then, when we think about it, I'm thinking, does this allude to a lack of collaboration, or is this a standalone challenge that can be fixed by one agency, right? So I'd like you to be my guest as we tour the agricultural exports ecosystem. That's going to be our case study for this discussion. I'd like to open your eyes to some of the opportunities available for collaboration, which you have missed, but are just right within your reach. So like I said, our case study is the agricultural exports value chain. And I could just pick every other value chain and do the same thing and just look at the opportunities that are bound, but we don't have enough time to do that. So we'll just stay with the agricultural exports value chain. And like I said, the depth of information in exports is one of the reasons why it's unstructured and underdeveloped. And so there's the opportunity for collaboration in export education, capacity development, product development, export readiness, international best practices. One of the things that I have seen that is always very amusing is the fact that some people have products which they did not develop for exports. And then, the next thing, they just meet Sokumwash as an export consultant, and so they bring their products and they say to me, I want to export this product. And I look at the product and I'm thinking, even I will not buy this product. And I'm in Nigeria here, and I'm just wondering who is going to buy this product, because there's such a thing as product development. But if the person doesn't even know that there's such a thing as product development, developing a product for export, then how does the person begin to start? The next thing we're going to move to is export farming. I always say to people that in developed economies, there's such a thing called export farming. That headline that we just saw would not happen if those commodities were farmed for exports, because that means that I will not be finding out after I have farmed those commodities that they did not meet international And at the point of it typically happens to us, what we have, pieces and push them into the market. Cassava that is high in some in aflatoxin or something, for example, your gari is going to give you the same result. So processing is not going to reduce the residue that is in it. Processing is just going to improve on the raw material, but it's not going to take out some of the challenges that the farming didn't handle. So it's important for us to go back to the soil. And so soil scientists have a job to do here, and then look at the seeds also. These seeds that we are putting into the soil, are they premium seeds? And then we're looking at herbicides and pesticides. And one of the things that headline highlighted, if you go back and read that particular publication, was the incidence of high pesticides, residues of those pesticides and herbicides. So how much herbicides are you putting in? Are you putting in the recommended herbicides and pesticides? Mechanization, there's smart farming, there's organic farming, there's global gap, and there are certifications. As we move ahead, we begin to look at shipping, forwarding, and air cargo. We look at the trucks. I had a very interesting experience with a truck that moved some cargo for me about a month ago. The person who got the truck had to go through a charterman and pay to the charterman, and the charterman paid to the owner. So apparently there was some miscommunication between them, because the owner said the charterman had not fully paid him, but my own person had paid the other person fully. So it's trying to offload the products. The guy says, no, I'm not going to offload until I get my full balance. We're calling the charterman. The charterman says, I've sent the money to him, but it looks like the money has been reversed and it has not hit my account. And here I am thinking to myself, goodness, why do I have to deal with this charterman and all of that? Why aren't there just systems? I don't necessarily have to buy a truck. Why aren't there just systems that work where that you can get the truck and the truck can deliver the goods to the warehouse without any hassles, right? So there are the barges, there are the cargo aircrafts, which is not one of the things that we are taking advantage of in Nigeria. There are the logistics companies, there are the freight forwarding companies, there are the documentation companies. I always say to people, if you want to take a tour of cargo exports, let's go to NACO and look at what is happening at NACO. It's not a very, very pretty sight, and it can be done better. Another area we can look at is export packaging. We look at the boxes, we look at the cartons, we look at the vacuum bags, and then there's a lot of conversation even going on now around the world around environmental friendly packaging, biodegradable, using biodegradable materials because of the environment. So how do people in packaging play with the people how do they work together with the people in exports to create packaging that is not only appealing to the eyes, but is friendly to the environment? These are some of the opportunities. Data collection and analysis, this one is a major one, because to make informed decisions, we need to have data that is accurate. Commodities data, destination data, where are our products going to, price data, what is the price trend over the years, market analysis. And, information is available, but it's not collated. And so when we want to make some informed decisions, we are not able to make it until we collate the data, right? And then try to make some sense out of that data. Another thing we're going to be looking at is quality infrastructure, the implementation of standardization, accreditation, and conformity, inspection, testing, laboratory, and product certification. In this part, you would see that most of the companies who even do this are international companies in Nigeria as we speak. There are the services like the insurance services, goods in transit, marine insurance, export credit insurance. There's currency hedging services. I know that we are all aware that in the last couple of months, I think just 2 months, between April and now, the dollar has moved considerably. I know that in April, we had bought the dollar for 580. And in June, I know that the dollar went as high as 610. That's if it has not gone higher. So how are we hedging currency? What are the hedging services that are being provided for exporters, and who is providing those services? The people in financial services, how are they helping with currency hedging so that exchange losses can be minimized to the barest minimum? There's AI, artificial intelligence, and we could use this for tracking of shipments, tracking of activities, security services, securing our containers. We could also look at the areas of measurements, the scales, the calibration of the scales, sales and after sales services. In commodities, it's interesting to note that our scale people are the same people. We've had them for a very long time, and not many people are venturing into this area because everybody just wants to move the commodities. No one wants to provide the after, no one wants to provide support services. As we move on, I'd like to look at contract processing or packaging centers. And this is very interesting for me, and I am really, really excited because I think last year when I was in Abuja, I was excited to see that some women were already doing this, where they would process your raw materials and package in your own name. So it just means that I don't have to have a factory. I want to start selling poundo yam, the powdered form. I don't have to set up a factory as an SME. There is a factory, like a contract processor, who is processing for me. Because they are already in that process, they will just process for me and also advise me on packaging, and then package for me, and then they do labeling for me. And that's just very interesting because they have an idea. It's always very important to test that idea to see if that idea works. And you can imagine if I was going to test my processing idea by setting up a whole assembly line to test that idea. If that idea doesn't eventually work, then I have to find a way to dismantle my assembly line. I won't need to do that if I was doing contract processing. Another very important area that we have not looked at closely is the language translation. And the students of foreign exchange, I was speaking to students a couple of weeks ago, and I was saying to them, tell me your course and I'll tell you how relevant you are to the exports industry. And someone is in the university studying French or German or Russian or any other language, and the person is thinking, if I'm not a trade attaché or if I'm not a translator for a popular company, then there are no jobs for me. But what about my website? If I'm an exporter, my website, if I'm appealing to people in other economies, should be bilingual, or it should at least be, it should have my own language and the language of the market that I'm hoping to reach. So if I was hoping to reach Francophone, then I would have to translate my website to French. So my website would be English and French. And so language translation comes in here. What about my product brochures? I've seen some of those brochures where you just wonder who did the translation for this brochure, because it looks like it's Google Translate person. The person just puts everything together. But this is an opportunity that a lot of people can maximize. Law is very, very critical, international law, because then you're going to be looking at the law of contracts, you're going to be looking at business law, you're going to be looking at the law that governs the contract that you have signed. And, it's very critical for more lawyers to come into the international law space so that the exporters don't have to be lawyers. I remember, I think 2014, I was trying to read a particular contract, and I had sent it to a lawyer to read for me. And the lawyer asked me, what should I look at? And then I just said to her, send the contract back to me, because there was no point. She was definitely not an international lawyer. And so the areas I wanted her to look at, the contract terms that I wanted her to look at, she couldn't look at them for me, and there was just no point. Another area that people are coming up strong, but not enough, is export finance, pre-shipment finance, post-shipment finance, factoring, bills discounting. The ease of doing exports from Nigeria would depend largely on how much financing will go into exports and how easy it is, to obtain that financing. There's e-commerce, and e-commerce is gaining a lot of ground in Nigeria. Business to business, business to consumer, consumer to consumer, mobile commerce, Facebook commerce. There is the commercial warehousing. So I always say to people, I don't have to own the warehouse. You could own the warehouse, and all you are doing is warehousing, and we will put our stuff in your warehouse. And that way, we're not tying down our working capital by, first of all, getting a warehouse. Why should I invest so much into getting a warehouse? A warehouse is a fixed cost for me. And if I don't do anything in that warehouse, the cost is fixed. But if I warehouse in a particular warehouse, then I can spread my cost over what I warehouse. I will only have to pay for what I warehouse, not necessarily the whole warehouse itself. There are fulfillment centers, warehouse warranting, storage, distribution, and handling. There are also commercial packing houses. So as we move to cold storage in Nigeria, we also have to have packing houses where some of these products, fruits, for example. I know that there was a time where avocado export was a thing, and a lot of people kept talking about avocado. And I thought to myself, if we wanted to export avocados from Nigeria, personally, and I stand to be corrected, I don't know of any packing house where we could all pack our avocados. Does that mean that each person would establish their own packing houses? I don't think that is absolutely necessary. So ultimately, what I'm saying is, say no to silos and embrace collaboration, because that's the way forward. As we move ahead, I'd just like to tell you a very short story on collaboration. In 2015, and I remember that meeting was the need for the meeting arose because there was massive damage cargoes in transit that year, the previous year, that was 2014, and it was attributed to long transit periods. So at that time, transit period to the Middle East and India was about 75 to 100 days. And, that contributed to damage to the cargoes at destination. And then there was also the issue of not enough dressing material. So when you want to load your container, if you've seen a container loaded, you dress the container first of all before you put stuff in the container. And so this led to losses, it led to claims and rejection of the cashews at destination. So this meeting was called, and at this meeting there were shipping lines, there were freight forwarders, there were exporters, there were transporters, there were warehouse companies. And then at this meeting, the exporters explained to the shipping line and everyone else that cashew nuts are perishable, moisture is a major disadvantage, and they made a case for the need to shorten the transit time considerably. They also told the shipping lines that they need more dressing materials for a 40-feet container, if they were going to keep the moisture level at a check. What happened after this meeting? Some shipping lines came up with amazing transit times. Transit time reduced from 75 to 100 days to 31 to 55 days. So some actually immediately had 31 days. Some others struggled with between 45 and 55 days. More dressing materials were provided for the container. And then they now had dedicated cashew season services. Those were not existent before. What then happened at destination was there was minimal damages to the goods in transit. It was a very profitable year for the cashew stakeholders and the shipping lines, and it improved the image of the Nigerian cashew in the international community. So let's think about it. Do you think that if each stakeholder had gone to the shipping line or had gone to the other people who were involved as individual companies, do you think they would have got this level of results? I honestly don't think they would have. We're inclined to be individualistic in our business models, right? But as a collective, we are stronger together and we're able to achieve more with less resources. If you want other people to collaborate with you, right, you have to be competent. You have to have proven that you are proficient with what you are doing. And most importantly, you have to be credible. Credibility is now a very, very scarce commodity. And so a lot of people are looking to do business with people that are credible. One of my clients had done some business with someone in the US. She had exported a product, but she had collaborated with someone in doing this exportation. And the person's side of the deal, the person messed up their own side of the deal. And so but it was her name on the transaction. And so what she decided to do was that she decided to give a refund to the person on the other side. And the person thought to herself that this person this person must be a very credible person, and this person's first transaction was genuinely a mistake. I want to do business with you, and I also recommend you to my friends. And that's what she did. She started to do business with her. She recommended her to her friends, and even though it was uncomfortable for her to be credible at that point, it was beneficial for her in the long run. So when we want to collaborate, let's remember that we have to be competent, and most importantly, we have to be credible if we want to stay in the export business for a long time. Finally, I want to leave you with this Yoruba proverbs. It says that we cannot clap with one hand. So if I'm attempting to clap, my two hands have to come together to make that clap. As long as I'm holding one hand up or I'm just showing one hand, I cannot clap. It says, if you walk up, I can't clap with just one hand. We have to come together and we have to collaborate. So thank you so much, Business Summit. It was a pleasure being here. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, ma'am, for that delivery, for that presentation. That was so enlightening. That was really, really enlightening. Thank you so much for sharing. So right now, my assignment here is to first and foremost do a quick recap of what you have shared with us. And then secondly, we'll go quickly into the Q&A session. And from all that you have shared, there were so many things that we actually got from this. And I'll start by saying that you said to us that, you said that once we decide to start to export, that automatically we become an ambassador of the nation we're exporting from. For example, to export from Nigeria, that makes us an ambassador of Nigeria. It's now beyond the name of our company or the name of our products. You also mentioned that our products must meet up international standard. You stated also that global trade thrives on collaboration, and you used a very relatable example by, you mentioned the mobile phone, which everyone can relate with, that looking at the mobile phone and how so many organizations have actually been able to come up. They were built with the purpose of serving the mobile phone industry, and that came. We also looked at the possibilities in the ecosystem. You said we should say no to silos. We should encourage collaboration. You also said to us that if you want people to collaborate with you, that we must be credible, and that is very important. It's extremely important. And thank you for sharing that story with us. I mean, we can all relate with that And perhaps if we find ourselves in such a situation, we have ideas on how to find our way out of it. You also mentioned about other value chain services that we can connect with. You mentioned the key export drivers, which are Brexit, Russian-Ukraine war. You mentioned the massive exodus of the Nigeria to develop economies, that is the JAPA that we all are familiar with. You also mentioned the global health campaign and you related that with the COVID pandemic, that we all experienced. And part of the other opportunities you mentioned that are available for collaboration, you mentioned the export education, you mentioned export farming, you talked about the shipping, food and air cargo, and also the export packaging, which is very relatable to us. You also spoke about quality infrastructure, that is the insurance aspect of it, goods in transit, marine insurance, to mention a few. You also mentioned the currency hedging services, the artificial intelligence, that is the tracking of shipments, tracking of activities, security services. You also mentioned about the skills and measurements, calibration and repairs. You said, collaboration in agricultural export value chain. You said, you mentioned the semi-finished goods. You shared how we don't have to set up a production line, how this can be outsourced. You spoke also about private labeling. Then you also spoke about the very opportunities we have in language translation opportunities, having websites that is bilingual, product brochures development, product application, product care, and all that. You also mentioned about the opportunity in the legal services, international law, the law of contracts, business law, international law. You spoke about the finance sector also, pre-shipment, finance, post-shipment finance, factoring, bills, discounting. And you spoke about the e-commerce aspect too. You mentioned the B2B, that is the business to business, business to customer, to consumer, consumer to consumer, the mobile commerce, and Facebook commerce. You mentioned about the commercial warehousing, which we actually see that is beginning to spring up even here in Nigeria. And you also said, say no to silos, embrace collaboration. You said we are stronger together. I mean, this has come severally during the course of the summit. You also mentioned that credibility is becoming a scarce commodity. And for all those that are in business, we can actually attest to that in our relationship and how we deal with business with either, suppliers or with even some consumers. You also mentioned that if we have credibility, I mean, it's imperative that the opportunity of staying long in business is a constant. You said we should be competent, and more importantly, we should be credible. And lastly, you wrapped up by saying we can't clap with one hand, that we need two hands to clap, and that also depicts collaboration. Thank you so much, ma'am, for all that you have shared with us. And now we'll have questions to ask you. First and foremost, you said something about, export packaging, appealing to the eyes. You mentioned about the use of boxes, cartons, vacuum bags, crates. You mentioned jute bags, flexi tanks, and so many others. However, can you please explain further how we can, how we can connect with this opportunity, this value chain? How are we able to come into play in this area? Would you be able to shed more light on that, please? Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, so with packaging, what we have seen most times is when MSMEs or SMEs want to get packaging, you have an MOQ, maybe minimum order quantity, let's say 500,000 boxes or 500,000 cartons that you have to buy. And so I'm thinking to myself, or you're thinking to yourself, I'm only producing, everything I'm producing as a company is just 1,000, right? And I need to buy packaging, and they are telling me at the factory that I can only buy 500,000. So you are thinking, why isn't somebody, or why aren't a group of people into packaging, right? And they are buying the packaging in bulk, and then they are selling to the people who need these packages. That's the first thing. Another thing is, why aren't some people thinking about what do people use for packaging? So when I go to the supermarket, for example, when I look at the shelves and I look at products that are imported, for some particular kinds of products, I can see that the packaging takes a particular form. So who is looking at what kind of packaging is used for what kind of product, and then saying, can we produce that packaging here, or can we bring in the packaging, and then begin to educate our people on using those packaging and also distributing that packaging to people without having to buy. As an SME, I honestly don't want to buy 500,000 boxes or 500,000 PET bottles from China. No, I want maybe 1,000 per time, because I might decide tomorrow that I don't like this packaging any longer. So I want to change my packaging, but I've already invested in that much packaging. So a company can, or companies can spring up whose own area is packaging, right? And is packaging for exports, not just general packaging, but packaging for exports. And we then know within ourselves that if we are thinking packaging, companies A, B, C are the companies that we go to.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ma. Thank you so much for that explanation. That brings a bit of clarity. Now, I'd like to ask, which of the banks are export friendly? What would you advise?
Okay, so so I've written a blog on this, on is your bank export friendly. I've written a blog before, so I don't think I would like to mention any bank, because I don't want to promote any of them. But I think that there are some things that you look at to know if your bank was export friendly or not. So export friendly banks have services that cater to exports. So if I wanted to open a form NXP, which is my form to formalize exports, how long does it take my bank to open my form NXP? That's one of the things that you should look at. You should also look at how long does it take the bank to confirm an inward LC. So some people, you want to do business with that bank, and between the time it takes the bank to confirm the inward LC and the time you are speaking to your client, between that time that they are still running around trying to confirm that LC, the client has moved on. So then you begin to ask, so it's just asking some questions from some of those banks. How long does it take to confirm an inflow? If I want to move, if I want to receive money into my position, how long does it take for that money to come into my position? If I was sending my documents through your bank, I remember there was this year when I was still in paid employment, we sent documents through a particular bank and the other party got it in 14 days, 2 weeks. And the bank that we typically used to send the document in 5 days. So if somebody is sending documents and my documents will only start being processed when it arrives at the other bank, I'm not going to give my documents to someone who is going to send it for 2 weeks when another person can get those documents to the other party in 5 days. So it's a list of questions that you can ask to know what bank is export friendly. I honestly would not like to demarket some banks or market some other banks. And I think that the banks are even working and getting better. So if we demarket them now and they get better over time, we would have cancelled them. No, we won't cancel them. But it's just a list of questions, a checklist that you should go through to know if your bank is export friendly or not.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Well understood. You mentioned while you were sharing about opportunities in scales, weight, and measurement, and that you also stated that even if we get to NACO to see how their process is done. So I'd like to ask, based on what you mentioned, that there are opportunities in this, how can one who has not played in this industry at all, how can one, come into this value chain?
Okay, so I was talking about scales and measurements. I know this used to be a very major challenge in those days because there was one major person who used to calibrate everybody's scale. And so when you wanted to calibrate your scale, you call the guy will say, I'm in ecom, or you call the guy will say that I'm in Akure, or something very interesting like that. And so you're waiting 2 days, you're waiting 3 days before the guy comes back from wherever he has gone to. Of course, because it's also a monopoly, it means that it's whatever price that he gives to you that you have to work with. So one of the ways of coming into some of the opportunities in the ecosystem is by networking with exporters. So there's a network of professional of practicing non-oil exporters, the MPNN, for example. And in the MPNN, you see people who are playing with who are playing in the service exports, playing in real product exports and all of that. So when you familiarize yourself with some of these associations or some of these groups, the Nigeria Export Promotion Council, when you attend some of their webinars, then you begin to meet practitioners. And then in listening to their conversations also, sometimes you go to a webinar and you go to that webinar to just listen. Because in listening to their conversations, especially if you're an outsider, some of the challenges that they are grappling with, you most likely have a solution to. But then you have to be in their midst to be able to take advantage of some of these opportunities. And getting into the midst of exporters is not something that is out there. You can get into their midst through some of these associations that I've mentioned.
Awesome. Thank you so much, ma'am. I would like to ask another question, ma'am. Now, if someone is coming up with a product, how will the person know if it's going to be if it's going to be a success, exporting it to another country? Now, I know this is very vast, it's quite vast, but then you could just use an example to be able to answer these questions, and you could also share the risk and how such a product can get into the market. You could also add services as well, because I recall that when you were sharing, you mentioned products and services. But most of the time, we are not in this industry, we always think about product. Now you mentioned services. What are the services that you think can also be exported? Thank you.
Okay, let me start with services first, because a lot of people don't think about services a lot. And services is like the low-hanging fruit. So a friend of mine, her son does graphics, right? And he just sits with his system and does a lot of graphics. And he puts it out on his IG. And I remember I think it was in January, we were having this conversation. We had gone for a conference, and he was calling her about someone who had seen the graphics and wanted the graphics. He wanted him to design something for him. And so he charged the person. Of course, the person was not in Nigeria. Charged the person. We were deciding on, okay, charge the person this much. The person agreed. And then the person said, send a payment. The person wanted to pay through PayPal. But unfortunately, Nigeria is not allowed to use PayPal. And so the challenge then became the payment, the payment platform. That was what the challenge became. But that you put out your service into the international community, people are willing to use your services. Another thing that I see that a lot of people don't do, and like I said, I was talking to some undergraduates. There was this webinar we had for undergraduates who were on ASU strike, just trying to understand exports really. And then I was asking them, how many of you are on LinkedIn? And they said to me they're not on LinkedIn. I'm like, my goodness. So what are you doing? Where are you? Well, on IG. What are you doing on IG? So on LinkedIn, what you typically find out is that most people who are looking for services are on LinkedIn. So they are looking for someone to do a service, especially post-COVID. The world has become smaller. They are looking for someone to do a service in Nigeria, and they don't want it's economical for them to hire someone from Nigeria to render that service. And so they are looking for people to render that service. And they go to LinkedIn and, they look at your profile and they see that you can render that service. And so they contact you, and that's all. And you are rendering the service. Some it's interesting to note that some architects are drawing for buildings that are not in Nigeria, because because the people on the other side know that they can render their service. It's interesting to note that some fashion designers don't design for the Nigerian market, and all their designs emanate from Nigeria. They're designing for the international community, and that's all they do. So for the services, I put up a slide in that same undergraduate program, and I think it was a slide of the band or something, and they were like, what's the band exporting? I said, his music. His music is there. Netflix, our movies are on Netflix. So those are some of the services. And, in fact, your services as, so let's take something even as, something as little as being a compare. So some people might even want, because we are speaking to an African crowd, they might want a local consultant to speak to them so that the person can pick up their accent and the other person can also pick up their accent. Another service that that we know about, all of us know about this service, but Nigeria has not really focused on it, is business process outsourcing. So I want to do a master's in the US, for example. Someone calls me from the Philippines. The office is in the US, but they have outsourced their call center to the Philippines. So that's a service. It's an export service, right? And our accent is good from Nigeria. We can do those things. But what you find out is that most of those services are taken up by Indians and the Philippines, right? So that's for services. So when we now look at product development, so I know that a lot of people always think their first impulse is to think that when I say, okay, go to the Nigerian Export Promotion Council, their first impulse is to say, no, Nigerian Export Promotion Council, no, those people. But there's actually a department in the Nigerian Export Promotion Council that is the product development department. So they walk you through the product development process. So it is not that I have developed a product and then I'm now thinking, will this product go into the international market? It is, I want to develop a product. How do I develop this product so that it goes into the international market? And there are quite a number of trainings that are available. The HACCP training, the hazard and critical point analysis training. In that training, they talk about physical hazards, environmental hazards, chemical hazards, and biological hazards. And when they are talking about those hazards, they talk you through even your raw materials. So from the point of even bringing in your raw materials, not even bringing in, sourcing your raw materials, what areas am I sourcing the raw materials from? So, there are some areas, for example, where the concentration of lead is high, and then I go and source a raw material from that area. By the time I process that raw material, my product, my finished product will be high in lead, whether I like it or not, because that is where I sourced my raw material from. So they go through the process of raw material sourcing, and then they go through the process of testing to see that these raw materials even meet up before you now process it into a product that is going into the international market. Then you can now, when you now start talking about the market, you can now delineate your market into, is it the general market or the diaspora market? Because of the massive exodus of Nigerians into developed economies, there's a diaspora market that is growing wider and wider. So if I'm looking at the diaspora market, I'm then looking at where is the concentration of this diaspora market. If I'm thinking about the US, for example, am I thinking that in Dallas, there are a lot of Nigerians moving to Dallas, and so there will be a concentration of people in that area. So it takes a lot of putting together, and that's why for most times we recommend export readiness. Not just I wake up today and I jump into the export space. It's I wake up today, I'm thinking I want to export. What are the boxes I need to tick to be ready to export? And when I tick those boxes, I know that I'm ready to go. So it's not I send my products to the market and my products get rejected. No, that won't happen to that kind of person, because the person even knows what the market is asking for and what the market is not asking for.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you so much for sharing that and for shedding more light on that. Then my next question for you right now is that how do I know if an importer or an exporter or a customer generally is credible? Is it until when something has gone wrong, or there are yardsticks, there are ways in which we can actually tell to know if an exporter is credible?
Okay, so the very easy way to do this is to do a credibility check. So I know that a lot of people don't want to spend their money on a background check, but if you are going to be exporting or importing, as the case may be, it might be, I think it's instructive for you to do a credibility check. And there are background check companies, even in Nigeria. So if I wanted to import from Nigeria, for example, and I was in another country, and I had got a buyer or a seller, I would naturally just check out the person. Personally, even before I do business with someone, I'll check the person out. So I'll go to CAC, and CAC is available in public domain. I'll check the company's name. I'll check who are the principal interest owners in that company, before I go ahead to say, okay, I want to deal with this company, or I don't want to deal with that company. So that's even on a local level. But so if I now want to do it on an international level, I'll definitely do a background check to check if that company is a credible company. And so when the check results returns, I can then see that, okay, this company is a credible company, or this company is not a credible company. Another way you could check is through the embassies of those countries, right? So most times, most countries have like chambers of commerce. They have bilateral chambers of commerce with our own countries. And the embassies also have like a list of companies that they know, So if I'm trading in a particular country, then their embassies will most likely know if that company is a credible company, because the embassy also doesn't want that company to mess up their own name, right? So you can always then check through the embassy if the person is credible. But the homework part of it is absolutely necessary. You can't just say that because the company has a website, the company looks flashy, the company looks like it's credible. We're not depending on looks here. Social media can package a lot of things for us. We're looking at an actual homework where we go ahead to check credibility.
Thank you for sharing that about background checks and credibility checks. Now I'd like to ask Ma, what is the best payment platform for exports that cuts across, and the one that can easily work for us here in Nigeria? Having shared the story of someone that that rendered service, and payment platform was now a form of hindrance, what would you advise as the best form of payment platform?
Okay, so there are different kinds of payment platform, and I think it's also because of credibility that we have been knocked off quite a number of these payment platforms. Those are the digital payment platforms. So most times we are stuck with our domiciliary accounts, right? Which is what we would use to receive money. But if you also have mirror operations in another country, then you can also have the payment platform, those same payment platforms, because they make for ease of payment. So I was trying to make a PayPal payment a couple of months ago, and it was a very small amount of money, and I could not move it from my DOM account. For goodness sake, what would charges be on this amount? Very small. And I had to get someone in the US to move the money for me and then move the money to the other party, right? I think for us in Nigeria, until we build more payment platforms that are from the African part of the world, we are going to still stay with our DOM accounts, maybe Flutterwave, and some other payment platforms. But most of these payment platforms also, as we begin to redeem our image, as a country, I think some of those payment platforms will re-enroll us back on those platforms. But I know that for the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, there is a payment platform that has been created for that. So the PAPS is what it's called. That payment platform is what is going to be used in Africa, and that is supposed to make trade easier among us in Africa.
Awesome. Thank you so much for shedding more light on that. It's amazing to know that there is a ripple effect of what happens here in our financial system and how it's actually, affecting exportation. So now my next question, Ma, for you is that what are the red flags to look out for in an export contract? You mentioned the services of the legal, the legal system. So what should we look out for in the law of contract for exports?
Okay, I have noticed over the years that a lot of people are very casual about their contracts. Maybe because they don't know that the contracts are binding and all of that. But there are just some things that you should look out for in your contract. You should look out for the date of the contract, right? You should look out for the expiry of the contract. So some people don't know that. Some people don't know that sometimes in the contract expires. So they will say this contract is valid for a particular period, right? There's also the penalty clauses, or default clauses. So there was this time that someone had signed a particular contract, and her banker was saying to me that my client has already signed this contract. And I said it's too early to pick a contract on this particular commodity, that your client won't be able to fulfill the contract. And so she said, well, it doesn't matter. If she can't fulfill the contract, she won't go ahead. And I said, well, there's a default clause on that contract, a penalty clause, that if she doesn't go ahead, she's going to have to pay 5% of the contract value. And the lady said, no, there's no default clause. So I said, open to pay 3 of that contract. And she opened to pay 3. And there it was, 5% of the contract value. So if I was going to pay back 5% of $100,000, right? 5% of $100,000 is $5,000, and I have signed, right? So if I'm looking at a contract, I'm looking at the default clause, then I'm looking also at my latest shipment date. And this is very, very important, especially for us on this client because of the logistic challenges that we have. So if they say latest shipment date is 31st of March, some people would think that 31st of March and 1st of April are the same thing. They are not, right? Because your bill of lading date is going to carry 1st of April, and the contract says latest shipment date 31st of March. And the person says it's not just one day. But that one day has a lot of implications for calculations, because if the vessel was supposed to sail at a particular time so that I can meet up with my production line, right? And it doesn't sail at that particular time, it means that the other party will also be falling into default. So we are looking also at your latest shipment date. This latest shipment date, does it work for me? Then another thing that you're looking at is the documents required. So my contract is there, and they say they want this document, they want that document. There was this particular transaction, then the person had said they wanted the document from the shipping line saying that the vessel was okay and all of that. I'm like, okay, I'm not going to get this document. This document is not in my control. this document is not a document that I can easily get. So we are either going to take this document out, or it's not going to be part of the negotiating documents. Because, you know, and a lot of people don't understand, especially when your payment model is the LC model, that you are negotiating not based on the products, but you are negotiating on documents. So they say upon presentation of complying documents, right, payment will be made. But if your documents are discrepant, payment won't be made, right? So when you have that contract, you are looking at the documents that are required, and you are saying to yourself, these documents, are they documents I can get? My shipping line is saying they will only give me 2 bill of ladings, and the buyer is saying I need 3 bill of ladings. So it's either I sit with my shipping line and say, you're going to have to give me 3 copies of the bill of lading, or I tell my buyer that my shipping line only gives 2 copies of bill of lading. You understand? So I also look at documents. Then another very important thing is the applicable law. So if there's a default, or if the contract goes south, what applicable law governs that contract? Is it the law of the country that I'm doing the business with? So if I was doing business with Vietnam, for example, the contract, is it governed by the law of Vietnam, or is it governed by common law? So if I look at the applicable law, because if the business goes south and we can't resolve that thing, we can't resolve our issues amicably, we have to go to arbitration. And so where is the venue for arbitration? What law are they going to use? Or if we now have to go to litigation, what law is going to cover that contract? So these are some of the some of the things that a person should look out for in their contracts.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mrs. Adewoyin. You are so resourceful as regards exports. Thank you so much. And on behalf of Pastor Mayokun Oriofe, the convener of Business Summit and the Business Summit team, I would like to, really thank you for your time. Thank you for your knowledge. Thank you for sharing your expertise and experience. We have learned so much from you. And obviously, for those that are interested in exports, there are opportunities of products and services that you have shed more light on. We are very grateful, Mrs. Adewoyin. We pray that God will send you timely collaborators in all of your endeavors in the mighty name of Jesus. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for sharing so deeply from your wealth of knowledge. We pray that God will add more to this pool of knowledge that you have in the mighty name of Jesus. God bless you.
Amen. Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure being here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. Bye for now.